Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So as we see here in this verse, right, so this is Bali Maharaj, who is speaking about the Supreme Lord, right, about Lord Vamanadeva. So Bali Maharaj, he was born in the family of demons, right, the same family where Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha were born, and also Prahlad Maharaj was born, right. So he is born in the family of demons, and as all of us have a bit of a background from our Vedas, there is always this tussle going on between the demigods and the demons, right? So, who is the king of demigods? Can someone tell? देवताओं के राजा का क्या नाम है? Indra. Right. So, as all of us know, right, Indra, he is the king of the demigods, and he rules the heavenly planets, right? स्वर्ग लोक के जो राजा हैं वो इंद्र हैं, right? And you must have seen in the programs, right? We get on many channels. He's always what? He's always attached to the chair. Just like a politician, right? He's attached to the chair. So he always wants his kingdom, right? As we have seen, right? So Indra and the demigods, they are basically the administration of the material world, right? So as we all know, ultimately Krishna, he is the controller of everything. Aham sarvasva prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante ma buddha bhava samanvita, Krishna says, right? Aham sarvasva prabhavo, I am the proprietor of everything. Matta sarvam pravartate, everything emanates from me. Iti matva bhajante ma buddha bhava samanvita. So people who are really, really intelligent, they worship me with that mood, right? So this is Krishna. So ultimately everything belongs to Krishna, right? And we are all parts and parcels. But Krishna created this material universe, right? This material world. And just like we see in any country, there is an administration, right? If you have to run a country, you need a lot of people to administer, right? Similarly, we have an administration in this universe. So sometimes people criticize that in Hindus, we have 33 crore Devi Devta, right? They say there are so many. In other religions, you just see one figurehead, right? But in Hinduism, we have so many. The reason is we have a higher like Krishna provided us in our Vedas a deeper understanding of a cosmic creation. According to time, place, and circumstances, Krishna arranges his messengers who come in every part of this creation, and they basically disseminate that message, right? So we see, for example, Jesus Christ came and he preached the message, and Christianity came from there. In Vedas, you get more information than, for example, what Jesus Christ provided, right? Because he came for a very limited amount of time. He came at a place, right? So based on time, place, and circumstances, every messenger of God, he gives a specific message. In Vedas, we see that there is more knowledge that's been provided about the cosmic creation, right? So we understand that just like in a country, you need many people to administer various departments. Similarly, in this creation, there are different departments, right? And they are mostly managed by the demigods, who are basically trying to serve the Supreme Lord, right? They are all, so Indra is not one person. Indra is basically a position. Just like a minister, right? Today you have Justin Trudeau as the Prime Minister of Canada, but given his popularity, he may not stay there for too long, right? So someone else may replace him based on his qualification, right? So similarly, the position of Indra, the king of demigods, it's a position within this material world, right? Because Swarglok, it's within the material creation of the Supreme Lord. It's not in the spiritual world. So there too, who would administer it, who would be the king of it, is determined by your eligibility, right? And the eligibility basically means if you've gathered a lot of pious activities, if you've done a lot of pious activities and you have done gathered a lot of positive fruits of those activities, eventually you can be exalted to the position of Indra, right? So that's why we see, because they are all administering, you have the sun god, the wind god, so on and so forth, right? And then on the other side, you have demons who are always power hungry, right? They are trying to get to the heavenly planets, right? Because what happens with power, you also get a lot of paraphernalia attached to that position, right? For example, when Justin Trudeau goes, there are a lot of cars which travel with him, right? There is a certain amount of respect that you get. There is a lot of material opulence that you get with that, right? It's a power, you get a lot of power and authority essentially, right? And in this material world, all of us are searching for power and authority, right? All of us want money, power, authority, all of those things, right? So it's not uncommon. So similarly, we see demons who are always basically looking for that. And so there is always this tussle going on. So Bali Maharaj belongs to the family of those demons, right? And in previous generations, Hiranyakashipu was one of the demons who did a lot of penances, right? And eventually he became so powerful that he threatened Indra at that time. And then, Krishna appears as Lord Nrsimhadev, half man and half lion. And then he primarily comes because in the same family we get Prahlad Maharaj, who is a devotee of the Supreme Lord, and actually Bali Maharaj's grandfather, he's Prahlad Maharaj, right? So Prahlad Maharaj, he comes as a devotee, and because Hiranyakashipu challenges Prahlad Maharaj and he's actually ready to kill him, although Prahlad Maharaj is the son, right? He's the son of Hiranyakashipu, but he's so power hungry and he cannot tolerate appreciation of Vishnu. He's ready to kill Prahlad Maharaj, right? And because Krishna is always ready to save his devotee, he comes to save the devotee, right? So therefore we understand, right, this play is going on, and Krishna is always coming to save the administration, right, Indra and all of them. But the point to note here is devotional service is beyond that. So it's not like if you have taken birth in the family of demons, you cannot be a devotee, right? So therefore we see Prahlad Maharaj, such an exalted devotee, and similarly when we now see Bali Maharaj, right, he's praising the Supreme Lord, right, and he's a devotee too. Eventually he became a devotee. So there is no criteria, right? There is no way anyone can be disqualified. Devotional service of the Supreme Lord is available for everyone. Krishna says, "Api cheta suduracharo bhajante mam ananya bhag sadhureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hita shipram bhavati dharmatma shashvat chakti nigacchati kaunteya pratijanahi name bhaktya pranashati." So api cheta suduracharo, Krishna says, ki durachari means someone with a bad character, right? And su, when you add su to it, it's a superlative, right? So not just a normal level of bad guy, right? The king of bad guys, right? No matter how bad a person is, api cheta suduracharo bhajante mam ananya bhag. If he's serving me, if he's doing my bhajan, if he's engaged in my devotional service sincerely, right? That's the criteria. It should be sincere devotional service. We should treat him as a devotee. Sadhur eva samantavya. We should treat him as a saintly person. Because very quickly he will become a dharmatma. Sadhureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hita chipram bhavati dharma. Chipram means very quickly, without delay, he will become a dharmatma, right? So today his character may be bad, but because he is practicing devotional service, he will very quickly be purified and he'll become a saintly person, right? So therefore there is no such thing as a qualification criteria for pursuing devotional service. Any one of us can at no matter what situation of life we are in, right? We should not think or be discouraged if we have done something wrong in our lives, right, or done anything bad, because there is no time for us to fix whatever wrong has happened in the past, right? So we should always be enthusiastic. We should seek the company of good people, right, and try to emulate them, their good behavior. Therefore, it's very important. Just like all of you, right? You all took time on this beautiful day, and you are sitting here in the presence of great Vaishnavas here, and we are discussing about the pastimes, right? So just by doing that, we can attain perfection, right? That is the idea. So we have to see, no matter what we have done in our previous lives or in the previous times, there is no time for us, there is no disqualification criteria, right? We should always aspire to find the right type of company, and then we should aspire for perfection. Right? That's one of the lessons that we get from here. Right? So Bali Maharaj, as I said, right, he was born in the family of demons, and Bali Maharaj at one point, by doing sacrifices, became so powerful that he basically controlled the heavenly planets, right? And then they approached Vishnu, who is an expansion of Krishna, right? It's basically Krishna. They approached Vishnu and they basically prayed to him that please save us from this situation, right? Because we see a demon now becoming the king of the heavenly planets, right? And that's not acceptable. And then, basically Vishnu agrees to appear as Vamanadeva, right? So he appears as the son of Kasyapa Muni and Aditi. And when he was born, born like with everyone knew basically he was Vishnu, and all of the demigods became really, really happy that finally Vamanadeva has appeared, right? So their motivation, as Prabhupada is suggesting in this purport, right? They praise Vishnu, but their motivation, it has a material aspiration to it, right? The material aspiration is we want the heavenly kingdom. So that's the material aspiration. Whereas for a pure devotee, the benchmark is high, right? It's very high. The benchmark is, it should be, whenever we perform devotional service, ideally it should be devoid of material aspirations. But even if we have material aspirations, it's not bad to approach God. It's much better than being an atheist, right? Because eventually what would happen is when we approach God, you will gradually develop attachment towards Him. Right? And Krishna says this, right? There are 4 types of people who approach me, right? And one of them are after seeking material, some kind of material wealth, right? Because all of us, we consider ourselves to be this body, right? And it's very natural for us to aspire for material wealth. But again, as I said, it's not a disqualification if we aspire for material wealth. But the highest benchmark that we seek from our acharyas, from all of the exalted devotees, is that when we perform devotional service, it should be devoid of any desire. The only desire should be to serve the Supreme Lord, right? And the reason is, it's not for Krishna, right? We should not think that, why should we do that? Like if someone is saying, we should praise the Supreme Lord without any material desires, it's not like Krishna has limited amount of material wealth and we are seeking material wealth from him. The verse that I said before, Krishna is ultimately the proprietor of everything, but it is for our own good, right? Just like, let's say if your happiness is dependent upon material wealth, and whether we have material wealth or not is not in our control, right? हमारे पास पैसा होगा कि नहीं होगा, that's not always in our control. There are so many external situations that decide whether we have what we have today, isn't it? If, God forbid, the economic situation goes really bad, no matter how good we are at our jobs, we can be kicked out anytime, isn't it? So the more our happiness depends upon material aspects of life, material things, the more we are sort of in a kidnapped situation. We are in a prisoner type of a situation, right? Because our happiness is tied to externalities, to external factors on which we don't really have any control, right? So the aspiration is, if our happiness can come from our constitutional position, and that constitutional position is that we are parts and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and by serving the Supreme Lord, we can naturally be happy, right? One question naturally comes, that all of us are seeking happiness, isn't it? Even if I ask a 10th class boy, I will ask him, what do you want in your life? Maybe, he would say, I want admission in a good college, right? I was just speaking with Mataji's son the other day, right? And he's seeking, of course, he's very, very nice, very academically doing really well, right? And it's an aspiration for us to find a good college and take admission, right? So if you ask him, why do you want to do that? He would say, so that I can have a good career, right? I can make good money, I can marry a good girl, so on and so forth, right? And then if you ask him, why do you want to do that? He will say, because that's what will make me happy, right? So ultimately it comes down to our happiness. All of us are seeking happiness. And the reason we are seeking happiness is what? Because Krishna himself, he is Satchidananda Vigraha. He is himself the embodiment of happiness. And because we are his part and parcels, Krishna says, Mamai Vamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. All of these living entities are my part and parcels. So we are separated living entities from the Supreme Lord. We are always seeking our constitutional position, right? And we are always seeking happiness because Krishna is happiness personified. So we are always seeking that. But the problem is, although we can be happy by serving the Supreme Lord, just like a hand, right? If a hand stops feeding the stomach, thinking that the food belongs to the stomach, not to me, the hand cannot be happy, right? The hand's constitutional position is to feed the mouth so that the food can go inside your digestive system, and by that, the hand itself will be nourished. Similarly, our constitutional position is to serve the Supreme Lord. And by doing that, we can naturally be happy. But instead of that, because we have forgotten that identity, we think that we belong to this material world. And because of that confusion, the lost sense of identity, we are suffering very, very hard in this material world, right? And the words I was saying before, Mame Vamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, Mana Sasthani Indiyani Prakriti Sthani Karshati, Krishna says. that all of these living entities, they are my partners, parcels, but because they are in this material world and they identify themselves with this material world, Prakriti Sthani Karshati. Karshati means struggle. They are all struggling really, really hard in this material world, right? And they actually don't belong here. They all belong to me, right? So that's the root cause. And that's what we need to understand and meditate upon, right? So when Lord Vamanadeva, he comes on by the prayers of Indra and all of the demigods, and as soon as he comes, everyone starts praising him, and then he gets to the job almost immediately, right? So after everyone celebrates his birthday and everything, and he immediately proceeds towards the place where Bali Maharaj was conducting a big sacrifice. So he was performing a big yajna. And then as Vamanadeva goes there, because of his effulgence, he was, of course, he's the Supreme Lord, right? So as soon as he goes there, everyone is enlightened by his presence itself. So everyone starts praising Lord Vamanadeva. Bali Maharaj washes his feet, and Bali Maharaj requests him, right? And he goes as a dwarf, right? He's like a brahmachari basically, right? He had a danda and a kamandalu with him, and he was holding an umbrella. And as a brahmachari dwarf, he goes there basically in disguise, right? Everyone knows he's Vishnu, but he goes there in disguise. So that, because what was his objective? His objective was to take back the heavenly planets and give that to Indra, right? That was the motive, that was the objective with which Vamanadeva came. And Bali Maharaj was, at that time, he had captured the heavenly planets, right? So he basically goes in a disguise as if, he's a very small boy, a brahmachari, with nothing, it's just his kamandalu and with his danda. And then when Bali Maharaj asked him, please ask anything, I'm ready to give you anything, right? So he basically requests Lord Vamanadeva to ask for any material benefits. And then while he was doing that, demon's guru, right, Sukracarya, he understood, right, because he could see that he is not an ordinary person, he is Vishnu himself, and he has come here to basically cheat Bali Maharaj so that he can get the heavenly planets back and give that to Indra. So Sukracharya basically advises or counsels Bali Maharaj at that time that, look, don't be befooled, don't make any promises to him, because if you make a promise to him, he will take everything, whatever you have, and he will give that to Indra, right? So by that time, Bali Maharaj had already made a promise to Vamanadeva, and Sukracharya even tries to convince in the sense that, I know, you want to keep your promises and everything, but if it comes to defending yourself, it is okay to break your promise, so don't worry about that. Don't worry about the karmic reactions of breaking your promise. Feel free to break your promise, and I'm advising you to do it. And then Bali Maharaj thinks about it. And then he thinks, no, as a Kshatriya, because I'm the king, it is my duty that I have to fulfill my promise, right? If I have given this promise to him, I have to fulfill that, right? So he was, at that time, he wasn't really in a devotional mood. He basically was more in the mood of following the religious principles, right? So as a righteous person, he basically said, no, I've made these promises to him, so I will go ahead with it, right? So he didn't pay attention to the advice of Sukracharya. And that gives us another important lesson, right? We always have to think about, we have to have an open mind. We always should do the right thing, right? And that's the true bravery. Like today when we choose our role models, right? Wherever you see in the movies and other places, bravery is basically defined by machoism, right? If you have, someone challenges you, and if you are able to defeat them in that challenge, that is perceived to be heroism, right? But the true heroism is not that. The true heroism is, even with all of the challenges, can you stick to your principles or not in life, right? So in this case, just imagine Bali Maharaj had everything, right? He struggled so hard to gain everything, all of the heavenly kingdoms and everything. And here is this person, and he has come to cheat him in a way. Although it's not really cheating, it's basically a blessing, right? Whenever Krishna gives, he's always blessing everyone, right? Krishna can never harm anyone. So ultimately it's for his own good. But from a superficial level, Sukracharya is suggesting him that this guy has come here to cheat you, and he will take away everything that you have, right? So beware of him. He already had that warning, and he understood that Sukracharya is basically telling the truth. That's what is going to happen. But he stuck to his religious principles. He did not deviate from that. He was not worried about losing everything. he said, although I may lose everything, but because I have made this promise, I have to fulfill. And that's what Krishna likes, right? So Krishna really liked it. So when he gave that boon, the boon that Vamanadeva requested was, I just need three pieces of land, basically, right? I'll take 3 steps, and whatever land I can cover in those 3 steps, that's all I need, right? A very simple thing. It's a small kid, small dwarf brahmachari. What could he take? So, and then Sukracarya basically that's when he advised him that although he's saying 3, but in 3 you will take everything that you have because he's Vishnu. So beware of it, right? But even with that advice, Bali Maharaj went ahead with it. So in the first step, Vamanadeva basically expanded his size, right? And then after expanding in the first step, he took everything, Earth and all of the lowly planets. In the second step, he took everything up to Brahmalok. So in 2 steps, he covered the entire material universe, basically. Nothing was left. There was no space left, right? And then he had promised 3. So where should he keep the 3rd foot, right? So that became an issue. And after taking those 2 steps, because now everything is owned by him, right? So he eventually became a prisoner, right? He was captured by Garudev, right? So Garudev, who's the Vahan, vehicle of Vishnu, right? He came and he captured Vamanadeva. And then the question is, where should I keep the 3rd foot, right? And because Bali Maharaj, his grandfather is Prahlad Maharaj. So at that time, Prahlad Maharaj appears. And because Prahlad Maharaj is a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord, right? And he was very, very pleased with Bali Maharaj. So when Prahlad Maharaj comes, he tells the fact, right? Because Sukracarya was telling him something else. He was telling him from a material point of view that you will lose everything. But Prahlad Maharaj gives him the spiritual perspective. That look, anyways, anything that belongs in this world does not belong to you, right? It anyways belongs to Krishna. You are not the owner. Krishna is the ultimate owner. So he is basically taking what anyways belongs to him. So you actually don't have anything to lose. But by surrendering yourself, right? If you surrender yourself, you will actually reach back to your constitutional position and you will ultimately be happy, right? So that's the understanding that we should all have, ultimately. So Sukracarya, although he was a guru, he was not a true guru in that sense, or he was not acting like a true guru in that sense, right? Because the duty of a spiritual master is to take one to their constitutional position. Because I was saying before, right, we have all forgotten our constitutional position. And the job of the spiritual master is to make us remind or realize our constitutional position, which is that we are eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. That is our constitutional position. Just the example that I gave, right? By hand, when it serves the mouth and the stomach, the hand itself gets nourished, right? Hand cannot eat the food itself, right? Because it does not have the capacity, the capability. Similarly, we are all seeking to be the controllers, right? Because we have emanated from Krishna. And Krishna has 2 aspects, right? Number 1, he is of course Satchidananda Vigraha, but he is also the ultimate controller, right? He is also the ultimate controller. He controls everything. Just imagine if Krishna doesn't control this material world, what would happen to us, right? There won't be any oxygen. The earth would go outside of its orbit, right? Everything will be devastated, right? There will be pralay. Everything will be annihilated, right? We cannot even control our heart rate, what to speak of anything else, right? Do we control our heart rate? Can we control we can stop our heart or make our heart go? No, we don't even have that control, right? Even that has to be managed by Krishna. So, he is the ultimate controller because only he can be the ultimate controller, right? We cannot expect a bicycle to drive a big trailer, right? Because a bicycle is not meant to do that, right? Similarly, we are not meant for control. Krishna is naturally, he is controlling everything. But we have to understand that's not the primary source of pleasure. The source of pleasure for Krishna is mutual give and take of the loving relationship with the devotees, right? So as we see in many pastimes of the Supreme Lord, and that's where when I say servant, sometimes people have a mental, some kind of a negative correlation with the word servant, right? Because in the material world, servant means something else, right? In the material world, servant means exploitation, right? Because we all have a tendency to exploit. So anyone who is serving us, we start exploiting them naturally, right? And it has happened so many times. Like even the Varnashram Dharma, right? Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Shudras are not the lowly class. They are not meant to be exploited by Kshatriyas or Vaishyas or Brahmanas. But because there was this hierarchy, they started this exploitation, and that corrupted the entire Varnashram Dharma. And today, because of Varnashram Dharma, people say that Sanatan Dharma is actually polluted. We should reject Sanatan Dharma. Because of Varnashram Dharma, they say that, right? But that's not the reason. The reason is because we as Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, we exploited Shudras. Right? So that's our problem. Krishna made these so that we can be situated in our constitutional position, and by engaging our by doing our day-to-day activities based on a natural propensity, right? For example, if I have a natural propensity to fight, I am a Kshatriya. So Krishna says, Chaturvarnam maya system guna karma vibhagasha. He did not say janma karma vibhagasha, right? So Krishna made these 4 varnas and 4 ashramas based on our propensities, right? Guna and karma, based on propensities and actions. So if I have a propensity to fight, I cannot be a laborer, right? Because my propensity, natural propensity itself is to fight, right? So I should rather engage in fighting to preserve the religious principles, and therefore I am a Kshatriya. And just by doing that, and by surrendering that action to the Supreme Lord, I can attain perfection, right? So there is no conflict. That was the idea. But instead of that, what happened was, people who were Brahmanas or Kshatriyas or Vaishyas, they started exploiting Shudras, right? And then the entire corruption started in this entire system, and everything broke down essentially. And at the moment, the situation has become so bad that we are simply struggling really, really hard to make as much money as possible, and that's what is going on here, right? But this birth, the objective of this human life is not basically that. The objective of this human life, because even dogs and cats are doing it, isn't it? Eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. These are the 4 activities that all of us are busy with, right? No matter what we are doing, you can categorize it in one of these 4 buckets: eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. Whether it's a cat, a dog, or a human, these are all basically material necessities, and we are all engaged in that. If we have a higher intelligence, the objective of that higher intelligence is not to do these 4 things more sophisticated way, right? We are not a more sophisticated dog. We have to understand that. We are humans, right? And the higher intellect that we have is primarily so that we can understand these aspects of our life. We can question that, why do I have to take birth if I don't want to, right? That may be difficult for us to realize, but one thing that we can easily relate to is, I do not want to die, but even then I'm forced to die, right? Or I do not want to become old, but even then I have to become old, right? I do not want to lose my job, but even then my job can be lost, right? So we have to understand that we are not in control here. And why is that happening? Right? If I don't want to do it, it shouldn't really happen to me. That's the idea, right? That feeling is very strong within us, isn't it? That I ultimately should be able to do what I want to do. And all I want to do is I want to be happy, essentially. So happiness should be spontaneously achieved by everyone. But because the material world is limited, and the definition of material happiness is material wealth, right? So just imagine if, in Canada and the US, there are people, per capita income is so rich, but because material wealth is limited, other parts of the world are deprived, right? So we are, in Canada and the US, every individual emits 10 times more carbon than an Indian, for example, right? And we are basically complaining about climate change, right? So we are really, really privileged. We have to understand. You cannot artificially ask people to reduce their consumption. If my sense of happiness is directly related with consuming more and more, I will not stop consuming. My sense of happiness has to come from within. Only then I can limit my consumption, right? So that's the idea. So therefore we have to realize our true identity, right? So then Prahlad Maharaj, when he comes and he, when he has that discussion with Bali Maharaj, right? He basically says that, look, this is the best thing that can happen to you. You haven't really lost anything. In fact, on the 3rd step, if you give yourself, right, that is the ultimate goal of life. All of us are actually seeking that, right? Ai nanda tanuj kinkaram, patitam mam vishmay bhavam vido, right? We are all actually, our aspiration should be to become, to get attached to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. That's our constitutional position. We want to go back and attach ourselves as a dust particle to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, right? Mahaprabhu tells us that. Ai Nanda Tanuj Kinkaram, right? Nanda Tanuj is Krishna. Kinkara means a small dust particle. Patitam mam vishwame bhavam. But I have fallen from that position into this material world, and because of that I am struggling, right? So ultimately, Prahlad Maharaj advises Bali Maharaj that you should request Vamanadeva to put the third step on your feet, and by that you surrender yourself to the Supreme Lord, and by that you will attain the ultimate goal of life. That should be the goal of life for each and every one of us, right? That is the perfection of life, the ultimate surrender to the Supreme Lord, right? Because that's what will give us what we are all seeking, and what we are all seeking is unlimited and spontaneous happiness. Unlimited and spontaneous, right? Because happiness that we see in this material world is limited. So if you are hungry, someone gives you a gulab jamun, that will make you happy, right? If someone gives you a second gulab jamun, that might make you happy. By the time you get to the third one, you'll be worried about diabetes, right? And by that time, if someone shoves a fourth one inside your mouth, you may vomit. See, so that's the nature of material happiness. It sounds very, very pleasing in the beginning, but eventually it shows itself as poison. Whereas spiritual happiness is the exact opposite. In the beginning, it may be struggle. Why? Because we are conditioned. We are attached to the material world. We don't have a taste towards it, right? So we have to develop a palate for it. So when we are chanting, initially there is no pleasure in it. But if we continue to chant, and we continue to chant, gradually our material aspects, right? All of the material pollution that we have in our hearts, that gets washed away, and then we can taste the true nectar. And then it keeps increasing and increasing every step. So it's totally opposite, right? So anything that you can imagine in this material world that gives us happiness, it always has these two characteristics. Number one, it is always limited, and number two, it is incomplete, right? So even though you may be happy with the first gulab jamun, but it does not mean that's all you need in life. You just don't need gulab jamuns in your life to be happy, right? You need a big house, a nice car, your kids to be happy, they need to be educated. You know, there are so many things that we need, right? So anything in this life, it has these two things attached to it. But Krishna, he's Sat, Chit and Anand, right? So Sat means eternal, Chit means full, complete, knowledge, and Anand means happiness, right? So all of us are actually seeking that. We are seeking complete, uninterrupted, right? Complete and uninterrupted happiness. And that would only happen if we do what? If we do uninterrupted and continuous service and unmotivated service of the Supreme Lord. Savai pumsam paro dharmo tato bhakti radokshage ahetuki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. Right? This is from Srimad Bhagavatam. Savai pumsam paro dharmo, right? So for all the living entities, paro dharmo, the topmost religious duty is what? To do unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service of the Supreme Lord. Ahaituki apratihata, right? So ahaituki means without any hetu, without any material desire. And apratihata means uninterrupted. And by doing that, what will happen? Yayatma suprasidati, right? We will be completely satisfied. Right? So if I remove the middle two sentences from this verse, Savai pumsam paro dharmo and yayatma suprasidati, right? That's what you'll be left with. So all of us, whatever we are doing, we are ultimately doing for complete satisfaction, right? And how can we achieve that? If you bring back the two lines from the middle of this verse, you will understand how to do that, right? By doing uninterrupted and unmotivated service of Adhokshaja, of Krishna, and that's the perfection of life. So that's the advice that Prahlad Maharaj gives to Bali Maharaj, and Bali Maharaj then gets the gift of devotional service when he surrenders himself to the Supreme Lord. And then Vamanadeva puts the third step on his head, basically accepting him as his part and parcel. And then ultimately he gives Sutal, another world to Vamanadeva, which is even more opulent than the heavenly planets, essentially, right? So by doing the devotional service, we never lose anything, right? We only have to gain from every point of view. We just have to gain everything, right? So there is no loss in it. Raja Vidya Rajakoyam Pavitram idam uttamam pratyaksh avgamam dharmam susukham kartum abhyayam. Right? So it is the topmost knowledge, right? And by doing the devotional service of the Supreme Lord, we can get everything, right? Because anything that we do in this world will stay here. We cannot take it with us. But by doing devotional service, this carries forward into the next birth as well. And this is the topmost secret, Raju Vidya, Raju Guhyam. Guhyam means secret, right? So there is one kind of secret which, if I don't tell you, you wouldn't know, right? So that's a secret that I'm hiding it from you and therefore you don't know. There is another type of secret that even though I tell you, you wouldn't really know, right? So this is that type of secret. Bhagavad Gita, many people listen, like all of you from here, you're hearing Bhagavad Gita, the message that I'm repeating from what I've heard about Bhagavad Gita. But even if you are able to understand 2% of it, that 2% you will retain even after this life. It will go forward with you, right? So whatever time you're spending here, let's say if I spend 9 to 5 every day in the office and I make money, when I die, that money will stay here. There is no benefit. Zero benefit. But if you spend 5 or 10 minutes with the devotees, those 5 and 10 minutes, whatever little knowledge you gain, that will travel with you in the next life, and that can protect you from the greatest danger. It's so potent, right? Just like if you're playing a video game, right? Someone gives you $2 million video game dollars, and someone gives you $10. Which one will you take? $10, right? Because they have value in the real world. It's basically that. Whatever money we are making, this world is like a video game basically. It's a simulation. We just don't understand it. Therefore, chanting the names of the Supreme Lord is compared to doing thousands and thousands of Rajasuya Yajnas. Right? There is no comparison. Why? Because chanting the names of the Supreme Lord is a spiritual activity. It's like earning actual real dollars. And whatever else we do in this material world, including various kind of Vedic sacrifices, going to the places of pilgrims, Rajasuya Yajna, basically anything with the material motivation, ultimately you will gain material wealth from it. But it's like a video game dollar, right? It's only be used within the video game, not in the real world. So thank you all so much for coming here and listening so patiently. And thank you to Mataji for very kindly hosting us, opening the doors of their house on a weekend, so that all of us could discuss Krishna Katha. And Krishna is very pleased by devotees who do this. So I'm sure Krishna will be very pleased by your and Prabhuji's effort, and that you all are engaging all of your neighbors and all of your friends into Krishna consciousness, because we get so busy with our day-to-day lives. We have become machines basically, right? The material world is like that. That's the nature of it. It's not in just this life. Even 500 years ago, people were leading their lives like machines if they did not understand the concept of Krishna consciousness. We basically get up in the morning, go to work, come back, sleep, and then repeat the next day. And this goes on and on. And today I was watching my young kid playing soccer, and I was thinking, I used to play soccer a few years back, right? And it seems like it was yesterday, right? So how did the time move from when I was 6 to now that my kid is 6-year-old? When you look back, it's like a flash. It went by like a flash, right? And similarly, in a flash, our deathbed will come when we become old. And we would be like, we didn't really do anything in this life, right? So if you have done Krishna consciousness, you will have a sense of achievement. You'll be peaceful, right? So it's a preparation for that moment, basically. So we all have to take this very, very seriously. And by coming here, you all have gained a lot. And for that, we have to thank Mataji and Prabhuji. And I'm sure Krishna will be very pleased by this act. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.